All right, guys, we're going to jump right into it. And as you all know, the Minnesota Timberwolves are facing the Phoenix Suns in the first round of the 2024 NBA playoffs. The Minnesota Timberwolves are the third place team in the Western Conference, and the Phoenix Suns sit at sixth place. And right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have been playing some outstanding basketball. They found themselves up 2-0 against an all-time great player and Kevin Durant, who has won 2 championships, who has won 2 Finals MVPs, a league MVP, and he also has two rarefied bucket getters on his team in Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. And right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves are up 2-0. And if you watch these 2 games, the Minnesota Timberwolves won these games in great fashion. And I think game 2 is the most important game in the playoff series, or one of the most important games in the playoff series. And that's when the playoff series truly begins, because in game 2, we see that team that lost, they come out with a frenetic energy, they come out with a crazy pace, because nobody wants to find themselves down 2-0. So that's when you see all the schemes, you see all the counters, you see players trying to play out a body. For example, I think before he got injured last night, Grayson Allen, his energy was so much different between games 1 and 2, and it was like that for the entire team. They come out and they try to make a statement. So I think the Minnesota Timberwolves in game 2, they did a great job of weathering that storm, because the Phoenix Suns did come out strong, and they did have a lead for a majority of the first half, and the Timberwolves found a way to get it done. But to analytically look at these first 2 games, I think these are great signs for the Minnesota Timberwolves and some pretty bad signs for the Phoenix Suns, because the Timberwolves were able to win these games offensively in 2 different fashions. And in the first game, we kind of saw Anthony Edwards. He put on a show in that third quarter. He finished with 33 points, but in that third quarter, he dropped 18, and it was just some very entertaining basketball. We all know who Anthony Edwards is. He's very charming. He's very charismatic, but at the same time, he's very fierce and he's very competitive. And it's a great combination, because you love him off the court, he's very funny, and then you love him on the court because he's not friends with anybody. And we all know all the time he talks about how much he loves Kevin Durant, his favorite player of all time, but on the court, he's talking crazy to him after giving him some buckets. And I think this is so good for the game of basketball. I'm a competitive person, so I love seeing that. And when I play basketball, I like to talk too. I feel like if we're playing basketball and there's not at least a little bit of trash talking going on, I don't know what we're doing out there. So I love that from Anthony Edwards, and I definitely love it in the playoffs with an NBA championship on the line. So we saw a great effort from Anthony Edwards in game 1. Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a great game in game 1. He dropped 18 points off the bench. Karl Anthony Towns had 19 points, and we saw the Minnesota Timberwolves win that game in a dominant fashion. And then also game 2, things looked a little bit differently offensively. Like we said, this is when all those counters come out, all those new schemes come out, and they try to stop what you did in game 2. And we saw Anthony Edwards, he got blitzed a lot more, he got trapped a lot more, and they did everything they could to get the ball out of his hands. I think going into halftime, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, I believe Anthony Edwards only had 5 shot attempts. So that was the Phoenix Suns game plan. They wanted to lose to anybody else but Anthony Edwards. And then we just saw multiple role players step up for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the guy who had the best game out of the role players, guys that we consider the others, that term created by Shaquille O'Neal, was Jaden McDaniels. He had an outstanding game, playing defense on one of the best shooting guards in all of the NBA, and Devin Booker, and then also pouring in 25 points. And before we get into breaking down how exceptional, and I say exceptional, I mean Jaden McDaniels has been so impactful for the Minnesota Timberwolves so far in this 2-game series. But we all know it's been resurfacing since Jaden McDaniels has been playing so well in the playoffs. When Anthony Edwards was asked about the Phoenix Suns, and he had said they got Kevin Durant, but we got Jaden McDaniels. And that's proven to be a very powerful statement, because Jaden McDaniels has been off the charts. Now, we talked about this in the regular season. We talked about this in the regular season a lot. When I mean videos on the Minnesota Timberwolves, one thing that was repeatedly brought up was their defense because, and especially in the playoff atmosphere, a lot of people, Jaden McDaniels is not a household name. He's not a guy that gets talked about a lot in the NBA. So a lot of people don't know how good of a defender he really is. He's 6'9", 6'10". He's about just as long as anybody in the league. No diddy, but Jaden McDaniels is an exceptional lockdown defender, and we're seeing that right now. So when you have Jaden McDaniels out on the perimeter, and then you have Rudy Gobert, and you have Karl Anthony Towns, and all these other long athletic guys, it makes it so hard for a guy like Devin Booker, who's a perimeter jump shooter, who needs to get in rhythm for him to be the best version of himself. Defensively, Jaden McDaniels, he has been a pest on Devin Booker, and he is making his life a living hell. And I know if I was in the NBA, I would hate to see Jaden McDaniels in a 7-game series because he is so problematic with his athleticism, his size, his length, and then of course, defensive instincts goes into it, defensive skill goes into it. He's truly a defensive ace. He's always at the top of the NBA at holding opponents to their lowest field goal percentage whenever he's matched up against them. Some of the best players in the NBA, LeBron James, guys of that nature, they don't shoot it well when they're being guarded by Jaden McDaniels. And then in game 2, he stepped up offensively. We talked about the changes that teams make in game 2, and we talked about how the Phoenix Suns, their biggest adjustment is that we're not going to let Ant-Man beat us. We're going to blitz him, we're going to trap him, and we're going to get the ball out of his hands. And Jaden McDaniels, he was one of the role players that stepped up big time for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He scored 25 points. And when you're going to get 25 points from Jaden McDaniels as the Phoenix Suns, there's really nothing else you can do at that point, because that was their game plan, to dare Mike Conley to beat us. We're going to dare Rudy Gobert to beat us. We're going to dare Jaden McDaniels to beat us, and that's exactly what happened. And he was just picking his spots. He was knocking down catch and shoot jumpers, putting the ball on the floor, being aggressive, getting to the rim, getting dunks, getting layups, getting it off the offensive glass. He was just at the right place at the right time, and he was capitalizing off of it. So I think Jaden McDaniels, so far, he has been the X factor in this series because he's been playing lockdown defense on Devin Booker, and then in game 2, he had an explosive offensive outing. So yeah, the Minnesota Timberwolves, right, so far they just proved to be a mismatch in the playoff basketball atmosphere, because we all know the Phoenix Suns swept them in the regular season, but as you can tell, the game of basketball is just so much different in the playoffs. And I was watching the Mind the Game podcast with LeBron James and JJ Redick, and JJ Redick said, and him being a role player, when the playoffs come around, when you're a role player, they start guarding you like you're one of the best players in the NBA. So it's just a completely different atmosphere. And then also, it's not just Jaden McDaniels that stepped up in games 1 and 2. We saw Karl Anthony Towns pick up 3 fouls in that first quarter. That was very dangerous for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I think they did a great job of surviving that, because not having Cat out there, that could be detrimental to their offensive flow. But Mike Conley was big time, hitting timely shots, timely jumpers, timely floaters around the paint, making great passes, and his veteran presence was terrific for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Actually last night in game 2. And you also got 18 points and 9 rebounds from Rudy Gobert. He was terrific. You got another 10 points from Nickeil Alexander-Walker again. Ant-Man poured in 15 points. So it was just an all-around terrific team effort for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they are truly looking like the #1 defense in all of the NBA. I'm still amazed at how well Jaden McDaniels has been playing defense on Devin Booker, and then I think he also did a terrific job on Kevin Durant in game 2. So I have to give a huge round of applause to the Minnesota Timberwolves, because they're not playing against no easy. It's amazing how competitive the NBA is today. We're talking about Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and so far they haven't been able to really get any easy looks. Every shot, every field goal attempt for the Phoenix Suns, or I should say every other one, just looks extremely tough. So shout out to Coach Finch, and then shout out to the Minnesota Timberwolves for playing some outstanding defense. But that's going to be it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment down below if you agree or disagree, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man. And that's curtains.